I stood in the shadows watching and waiting for the right moment to make my presence known. I was wired, feeling jittery like I was ready to take on the entire army. I steadied myself by thinking of all my friends who had stood by me. I recognized one of the men from the photos as he parked his car in my driveway. That prick has balls. I gotta give him that. No brains. But you can't expect everything. He rearranged his package as arrogantly as you please, probably thinking that parking in my drive was okay, since he was here to park himself to screw my wife. As he walked back out the gate, I stepped out of the shrubbery lining my front boundary and fronted him, slamming him up against a car parked at the curb. I was growling, "Okay, shithead. I know where you're going and why." The guy was taken totally by surprise. "Get the hell off me, you prick." I kept my weight on him. My mood lightened as I saw the fear in his eyes. "Steve, is it? I'll tell you what, Steve. I'll give you a break, but only if you help me out here." Steve looked now at the three of us, not just me, a sickly expression creeping onto his face. He may have been a sleazeball, but he was an intelligent one, well enough to know which side his bread was buttered, who he was dealing with, and why. Recognizing me as Kelly's husband gave him all the information he needed. "What are you going to do, Turkey? I can just walk away now, and you can't prove anything." "So says you, moron. You're parked in my drive, so if you go back in there, I'll have you arrested for trespass. I have photos of you and my wife from the last time you were knocking her off. How do you think I knew why you're back here tonight? So while you're cooling your heels in the slammer, I'll be including you in the lawsuit for alienation of affection along with the rest of those shitheads." Steve laughed feebly. "Don't give me that shit. You've been reading too many paperback detective stories or watching too much Boston Legal, you shithead. We don't have alienation of affection laws here in Australia." I smiled menacingly. "I just thought that since you're stupid enough to be someone else's wife, then you'd be dumb enough not to know what loss of consortium is." The look on Steve's face showed he didn't know what I was talking about. Just as I thought, the Americans call it gas, we call it petrol. Same shit, different label. It doesn't mean shit. But what it does mean is that you'll be working for the next 20 years, paying off that debt, along with all the other scumsucker inside. That is, if you don't do what you're told. I knew I was bluffing. I actually wasn't sure how I'd fare with the legalities of a lawsuit, and the only photo I had of this guy was going into the house that Kelly was already in, which wouldn't be much use in court. Steve crumbled. "What do I get out of it if I help you nail the witch?" As I said, you get to walk free, and I suggest you keep walking too, or better still, make it run. Me, along with Trent the private investigator and Colin, an off-duty police officer, who was one of Leonard's good mates, gathered just out of sight as Steve nervously knocked on the front door. It was opened by Chad, and he welcomed the young man in. "Welcome to the House of Harlots. Come in and take a number. We have one hot and willing piece of gash here tonight." I shuddered at his reference to Kelly, my supposed loving wife. Chad was laughing, so hard, that before the door could be closed, I exploded through it, followed by Trent with camera in hand and ready to start snapping pictures. Colin had his badge out and ready to quell any heated exchange that may occur. All you could hear was the static snapping and slightly eye-blinding flash of light from the camera. Hell, he must have that on auto? It's amazing what you think about at times like this, and I almost broke up laughing at the thought of Trent doing a James Bond, diving commando style into a room with both guns blazing, snapping off shots. Kelly was having sex with multiple partners, as Trent went to work snapping off pictures right, left, and center. Kelly's eyes popped wide open when she saw me standing there watching, and struggled herself. I suppose it's not easy when you've got nowhere to go. Then she extradited herself from them, rolling, not so gracefully over the back of the couch, trying to hide. Benjamin just stood there with a dumb smuck look on his stupid face. I almost laughed again at her antics. What did she think? I hadn't seen her getting screwed? Screw that woman is stupid. She popped her head back up with that stunned mullet look on her face, squeaking, "Oh God, no. Screw my dog. No, no, no. This can't be happening." That was when all hell broke loose as men and women started diving for cover. Kelly was cowering behind the couch, trying desperately to find something with which to cover herself. "You don't do that shit, huh? Could have fooled me, you 304. Chad just stood there in total shock at the speed of the invasion before offering any opposition. "Who the hell are these people, and what do you think you're doing barging into my home uninvited? This is against the law, Barrymore, and I'll have your butt in court so fast your head'll spin." I looked around at a naked Chad. I looked over to see Pam scrambling out of a strap-on harness. Screw me dead? Oh well, you can only work with what you got. Right now he just looked pathetic and his anger amused me. Steve had done a runner as soon as the others were in the door and no one noticed. I sneered at Chad. You're right about being in court, you miserable piece of shit. But it won't be me getting sued. I looked to Trent. Get what we need? Yeah, mate. Sweet as. More than enough and prime quality too. All their faces as well, not to mention a lot of the action. This is home invasion, you a-hole. Anything you got here won't be admissible in court. You got jack shit and we both know it. Chadwick's face was a mixture of scared and angry. I pulled a mini tape recorder out of my pocket. You guessed it? It was the one I was meaning to buy for a while now, and this seemed a pretty good reason to lash out the $50. Senior Sergeant Peters had warned me that I needed proof of invitation. Otherwise, it could be construed as a home invasion. I didn't care, and we'd sort out the legalities later. I hit rewind, then play. Welcome to the House of Harlots. Come in and take a number. We have one hot and willing piece here tonight. I turned to Colin. That sounds to me like an invitation, Senior Sergeant Peters. What is your professional opinion on the matter? Colin flashed his badge and chuckled. It couldn't be more of an invitation if it was gold inlaid. I sneered at Chad as his face paled. Just as I thought, you shit. You and your ilk are toast. Start counting your cash. While all this was going on, the others were finding clothes and trying hard to become invisible. Kelly was crying buckets of tears and struggling to get into her blouse, still not managing to find her bottom half. I felt sick seeing my wife of 6 years. I walked over to the table where I spotted Kelly's handbag. Appending it, I found her keys and cell phone and sorted through the other paraphernalia. Apart from the usual petty shit she keeps in it, there was several dollars in her purse, which I decided to leave. There's $9 here and some shrapnel, which makes about $1.50 for every year of marriage. Significant when you think about the scene we have before us. You're not even a $2.304, you stupid witch. Don't bother coming home. As of now, you don't have one. Kelly stopped what she was doing. Please, sweetheart, don't say that. I made a... Shut your mouth, you 304. There is nothing you can say that I have any interest in hearing. Picking up her credit card, I flicked it at her. It did a nice spiral as it flew, and bounced off the couch just in front of her, making her cringe. That piece of plastic is now only good for scratching your disease-ridden butt. All your cards and bank accounts have been frozen until the court case for our divorce. I hope all that you got was worth it. Kelly slumped to the floor and cried her eyes out. Leonard and I were sitting in our favorite watering hole. You know, Kelly rings and leaves messages for me to talk to her on an hourly basis. I've deleted every one of them. I can't think of a single reason she could give me that would make an ounce of difference. But you know what really blows my mind? Leonard took a swig of his beer. No, mate. I know what blows my mind, and I can only imagine yours. You still love her, don't you? I nodded. Yeah, there's that. But the other thing is, what am I going to do with Steve? I must have really put the wind up him. The little scumsucker did exactly what I told him to do and ran. Well, he certainly didn't drive. His wheels are still sitting in my front yard, so I can't even get into my own garage. Leonard looked blankly at me. Yeah, well, that might be a little bit of my doing. You see, I parked in behind him when you blokes went next door to break up the party. Steve came out of the house like his but was on fire, saw that his car wasn't going anywhere, and pissed off down the road on the hoof. Hell if I know what he was thinking. I don't think he knew right just then. It was a matter of getting the hell out and as far away as he could. Leonard was chuckling to himself when I asked in a more somber, dejected tone, how long before it stops hurting? Leonard's face went somber as well while he traced circles on the bar with the bottom of his bottle. Speaking from experience here, James. The simple truth of the matter is, it doesn't. At least not right away. You're going to be hurting for a while yet, but you will get past it with help from good friends. Trust me, I'm living proof of that. If it wasn't for you and some of my other friends, then I'd have cut my throat years ago. I nodded dejectedly as I looked at Leonard's sympathetic face. 6 years for us to build that marriage, mate, and it only took her 6 months to tear it down, not to mention how many weeks for me to bury it. Leonard patted me on the shoulder. Look at it this way, James. It's always the darkest before dawn. I wasn't sure if it was the look on Leonard's face or what. I looked at him for a minute and then laughed hysterically. Where do you come up with this shit, Leonard? That'd have to be the lamest, overused statement I have ever heard. Leonard smiled at the change in my disposition. I had to admit, whenever I felt down, my sense of humor has always bailed out on countless occasions. The lack of oxygen up there in the stratosphere where your head lives must be sapping your gray cell sun. I got two. Not one like you gonna have, but 2 ex-wives, and I've heard them all, more than twice over. I got more. You want to hear him? Hell no. Something I've been meaning to ask you. Have you talked to Colin? Leonard shrugged. Yeah, He asked me if I was with you last week, and I told him we'd gone fishing for the whole week to get you away from all this crap for a time. Why? He asked me the same question. Did he tell you why he wanted to know? Leonard took another swig of his beer. Nope, just nodded and said he'd see me later. Are you interested in knowing? I raised my beer bottle. Not particularly. To the ex-wives club. May they all rot in hell. We had just finished clinking bottles. So it's true then, you two have split up? A female voice pealed from behind. I saw Leonard mouth silently, oh shit, this could be a little awkward. He wanted to tell me who it was behind me, but I held my hand up to stop him. Hello, Marcy. How'd you find me? Marcy chortled feebly. Where else would you be? There's only one place you drink at, and that's the tavern. So who's at fault here? I still hadn't turned around, and was staring at the rack of spirit bottles behind the bar. I knew I'd have to talk to Kelly's parents sooner or later, but was just hoping it would be later. Well, let me see if I've got this straight. Kelly's most likely at your place crying on your shoulder, telling you how I'm some sort of scumsucker, and I still have the house and contents as per the prenuptial. You're a smart woman, Marcy. You work it out. There was silence and Leonard looked a little uneasy at being around. So for his comfort, I got the attention of Gary, the bartender. Another beer, and I'll have a Chardonnay for the lady. I patted Leonard on the arm. Stay here while I have a little heart-to-heart with Kelly's mom. Can you drop the drinks over when they're ready? Leonard nodded and went back to looking over the bar. Sure, mate. I wandered over to a table in a quiet corner and pulled a chair out for Marcy. Little more private, don't you think? Marcy nodded grimly, and she took the proffered seat. Was what that stupid girl of mine do bad? Sitting myself down, I nodded. I'm not going to go into details, but yeah, about as bad as it gets, I'd say. I do have photos if you really need to see the evidence. Marcy sat looking into her lap and held her up hand without looking up. No, I don't need to see how my daughter has ruined her marriage. My imagination is running riot as it is. I think Marcy was hurt by this as much as I was. She was quiet for a minute, then spoke in such a low whisper that I almost missed what she was saying. I'm sorry, James. Kelly was the last person I thought would cheat on her marriage, especially after knowing what I had gone through. Leonard dropped off our drinks and quietly slipped back to the bar to give us a bit of privacy just as my cell phone rang. I looked and saw that it was Marcy's home phone. I showed it to her. Answer it if you would please, James, but put it on speaker and don't let on I'm here. It won't be Conroy, he's at work. I laid the phone on the table between us and hit the speaker button. Hello? James, is that you, sweetheart? The tremble in Kelly's voice was noticeable. Yep. Can I come home? We need to talk, darling. This is all a big mistake. No one needs to know what happened. They made me do all those things. I love only you, sweetheart. Truly I do. It was all they're doing, sweetheart, and I'm so sorry you got hurt. Please, we have to talk. You have to let me explain what happened. You always said that we can work out any problems as long as we talk about them. Please, sweetheart. I'll be the best wife you could ever have, darling. I'll never cause you to worry ever again. Marcy was taking a pin out of her bag and flipped a bar coaster over while Kelly was pleading with me. She wrote, damage control, and pointed to the phone. I nodded and said, who don't you want to know what you did, Kelly? There was silence for some time and I prodded, well? Marcy decided to put Kelly out of her misery. Would that be your mother, Kelly? She asked in a flat, menacing tone. You could hear the gasps as Kelly realized that her mother had heard everything she just said. Oh God, help me. Is that you, Mom? You want to pray that God helps you, my dear, because you have made damn sure that there is no one else that has the slightest inclination of doing it. You could hear the sobbing as Kelly realized that her world had finally imploded. Mom, I'm so sorry. Shut up, Kelly. Marcy snapped without raising her voice. It's obvious to me now that my daughter hasn't got the brains God graced a grasshopper. Don't try thinking anymore, Kelly. That has got you the trouble you're now in. All I want to hear out of your mouth from now on is, yes, Mom. Is that clear? Mom. Kelly, listen to me for once in your pathetic life, you insolent child. There was silence for a minute, then, yes, Mom? I now know where Kelly got her acid tongue. I was feeling chastised and she wasn't even talking to me. Marcy's voice never raised past a low growl. Most women scream in a high pitch when they're angry and losing their cool. Then once losing total control, their scream starts to become ear-piercing. Not Marcy. She was as controlled as you could get, as she continued with Kelly. The way I see it now, you have two choices here, Kelly, but even a pea brain the size of yours should be able to make this choice. 1. You hang up that phone and sit on that couch, with your legs together, young woman, hands in your lap, and your head down. You will wait for me to get home, and I will have a long talk to you." Marcy paused for effect. "Notice I said to, not with. Do you hear me, child?" There was another long pause. "Yes, Mom." Choice number 2. If you decide you can't handle number 1, then you hang up that phone and get off your stupid 304 and walk out my front door, and Kelly, you'll only take with you what you have from your destroyed marriage to a wonderful man. There was silence you could cut with a knife apart from the ever-present sobbing. "Yes, Mom." The entire spark had disappeared from Kelly's voice. Any other time I would have felt distraught listening to her like this. "Now I will give you 30 minutes to make this decision. Even a moron of your caliber should be able to make the right choice in that amount of time. But know this as well, Kelly." A chill ran down my spine, and I had to look away to Leonard, who sat there grim-faced. I felt as though the lever on the gallows was about to be pulled as I heard Marcy continue. "If you decide to walk, then you best keep walking, my dear. And don't you ever darken my doorstep again. You'll be on your own, you stupid girl. And I can't see you lasting more than a couple of months before you're laying on a slab in some morgue. Are you hearing me, Kelly?" As angry as I was at what Kelly had done, I couldn't help but feel a little for what she'll be facing in the future. She replied, "Yes, Mom." "Good, 30 minutes from now, Kelly. I am hoping you make the right choice, but I'll leave it up to you. Now I want you to apologize to your huss, to James, for all the trouble you have caused him, and then say goodbye." There was a lengthy silence. "Kelly?" Marcy snapped angrily. Then came a gasp from the phone and then crying, "I'm sorry, James. Please forgive me. I don't know what got into me. I'm so sorry." "I'm sorry, Mom. I'll think about what you've said and make a good choice. I promise, Mom." Kelly was blubbering into the phone by the time she finished. "Say goodbye, Kelly." "Goodbye, Mom. Goodbye, James, and I'm sorry." The connection was broken, and I sat still, not able to look Marcy in the face. "I don't know what to say to you, Marcy. I loved Kelly with all my heart. She was the part of me that made me a whole human being. When she let those a-holes, when she did that, it was like she was letting them do it to me. She seems not to have the same feeling for me, though," I said as I turned back to look at her. Marcy raised her face, tears falling like raindrops off a leaf, and she didn't even try to stop the flow. "Nothing you need to say, James." She sniffed and sobbed. "I think I know what you're saying. It's the same and different at the same time for us women." Marcy put her head down and went on ripping her tissue into small pieces. "I know how I felt when that a-hole ex of mine took off with his bimbo. It broke my heart that he felt so little for me that he could just throw me away like that, especially after I gave him everything, all the love and support. It almost killed me. I don't know what got into her. She was such a good girl, or so I thought. I can't understand it." She brought her hands to face, crying. My heart broke again for the pain that this poor woman was again going through, and this time at the hands of her own flesh and blood. All I could do was shake my head in wonder. "I don't understand it either, Marcy. If it's any consolation, the first 5 years were wonderful. I just fell further in love with her. I'm not saying that everything was roses, but you know how it is. There's always jockeying for position, working out the who, the what, and the where, like in every union of two separate personalities. I accepted that. I wasn't looking at Marcy as I tried to tear the label off my beer bottle in frustration. Then everything seemed to change. Kelly changed. It was so slow that I didn't even see it at first. Then it got to be some sort of fight for supremacy, just who was in control of the marriage, not like I thought it should be. An equal sharing like it started out as. I looked up to see if Marcy understood what I was trying to say. Everything was going well until Chadwick and Pamela Stanton showed up 7 months ago, along with their ilk. Marcy's head shot up in a snap at the mention of them. Pulling another tissue out of her purse, she wiped her eyes. "You have got to be kidding me. Pam Stanton's maiden name wouldn't be Gleeman by any chance?" When I nodded, she continued, "Let me guess. That bubblehead Vavers. What about that nasty piece of shit Dalton? And I suppose her witches in waiting, Tracy and Sue Kinmore, were there as well? The surnames have changed, but you nailed some of their given names perfectly. Except for Vavers. But if I don't miss my guess, you're referring to Elizabeth McIntyre, the airhead. I don't know any Daltons, but if the name's Caroline Dalton, then that's her. Although I haven't come across any Tracy, but Suzanne is one of them. You seem to know them better than I do." Marcy's face had gone from distraught to downright angry in seconds. "Damn right I know those trollops. I had to pull Kelly out of grade 10 and change schools, just to get her away from the Dalton gang, as they called themselves. Carol's a case in argument for euthanasia, and Pam is one for female circumcision. If I had known she was consorting with that lot again, I would have told you to get her the hell away from them. How long have they been back?" "From what I can gather, Kelly met up with Carol about a year ago. I thought she had told you by the way she spoke." I got the impression that you were good with her friends." Marcy scoffed angrily. "Not likely." Her language brought me up a little short. I'd never even heard Marcy say blimey without blushing with embarrassment. Now I understand why she's locked herself in her room and didn't want to talk about what had happened. "Wait till I get back home. That stupid girl will be wishing she was lying in some morgue by the time I get through with her." I was still in thought and commented, "I know I've talked a little about them, but I've always used their surnames, and since they're different to the ones you knew, we seem to have missed the boat here. Come to think of it, now that it's mentioned, Kelly always seemed to steer conversation away from them when you were around." Marcy shrugged, and I went on to tell her what I had done to try to avert the demise of our marriage, and her face turned hard as iron. I held up my hands. "Don't worry. I won't enforce the codicil. She can have what she brought into the marriage as per the original prenuptial. I won't fight that." What Marcy said next flawed me. "Don't you dare, James. You take what's rightfully yours, young man. If my stupid daughter knew and signed something as blatantly obvious as that, and she still went ahead and played around on you, then she deserves everything she gets." Marcy settled a little. "Don't worry about Kelly. I'm certain she'll be at home when I get there. If there's one thing I do know about my daughter, and that is that she can't stand being alone, my threat to never come home will be enough to make her decide to stay and take her medicine. I'll see to it she doesn't starve, but by God, is she going to be licking boots and scrubbing floors until she gets back on her own 2 feet again?" I just sat there and thought that I was damn lucky to have parents like mine. If Kelly thinks that it is all over bar the shouting, she's going to find she's painfully mistaken. Marcy sat a little longer, not saying much. Well, when you think about it, there wasn't really all that much you could say. As she was about to leave, she stood up and hesitated. "James, can I give you a little of my perception into how differently men and women think?" I nodded. "Any advice you can give me to help me get my head around this would be appreciated, Marcy." Marcy smiled. "Just a little I've gathered over my life, James. You know, men and women see marriage a little differently. I know Conroy loves me vigorously and shows me by what he does for me. Every time he gets that twinkly in his eye, I know I rock his world, and that he's showing his love for the only female on this planet for him. We both know that sometimes that gets misconstrued as being seen for casual partners that might be true. Women don't need the physical as much as men. Theirs is more emotional, so they show their love by giving of themselves, their most precious possession, to their partner in a show of love. That's why I don't understand what happened to Kelly. I'm as much at a loss as you are, James. She shouldn't have been able to do what she did if she loved you the way she claims. I can only assume that she was hoodwinked by Carol and her cronies, maybe trying to relive the earlier years without the constraints of parental control." I looked up to her and nodded, thinking she was right, but not saying anything, and Marcy sensed I was waiting for her to finish. "Please don't judge all women by my daughter's stupidity. We don't know what came over her, and don't blame yourself for backing the wrong filly either. You can study the form guide and track all you want, but sometimes the stupid old nag just up and breaks a leg on the home stretch. There's nothing you or anyone can do about it. Marriage is a bit like a horse race in that regard." I got up and gave her a big hug and kiss on the cheek, whilst she sniffed and patted my chest. "You know, your father and I go loggerheads at each other, but we really do understand that neither of us was to blame for our marriage's failing. You just be thankfully that you weren't screwed over like us. As you know, Conroy is my third husband and Kelly's father, and your mother is your father's second wife. They're good people. I know Conroy will be devastated by this. You'll find someone who loves you in return as well. You just have to get back on another horse and finish the bloody race. You hearing me, James?" I smiled and wondered how unfair it was for a woman like Marcy to be saddled with a daughter like Kelly. "Yes, Mom." Marcy's face broke out in a teary smile, patting my chest affectionately once again as she turned away one more time. "You be good, and don't be a stranger. I have an errant child to horsewhip, so I'll be seeing you around sometime." She chided me good-naturedly over her shoulder, and with that, she left. That left me thinking about all those stupid mother-in-law jokes. I actually got on better with her than I did with her daughter. How screwed up is that? As I went back over to Leonard to fill him in on what had transpired with Marcy, I thought about how I first met Kelly at the Melbourne Cup. Kelly and Marcy had entered the fashion on the field competition as a mother-daughter entry. They won hands down, and I was taken with Kelly from the start. Marcy is a racing nut, but rarely bets. Her first husband cured her of that. She just loves the excitement of race day. Oh yeah, I didn't tell you. Marcy taught me everything there is to know about horse racing. She's the nicest woman you could ever hope to meet, bar none. Marcy gave me a sympathetic smile and rubbed my arm affectionately as she walked past me and out of the courtroom. I watched as Kelly came up to me after the decree nisi was finalized and handed down. I pondered once again, 6 years for us to make the marriage, 6 months for her to kill it, and now 6 weeks for me to bury it. 6, 6, 6. Isn't that the devil's number, or the mark of the beast? I wasn't sure. All I really knew was, it was bloody appropriate. I was now officially single again, and it gave me no real joy seeing the marriage I fought so hard to keep laid to rest. It didn't have to end this way, James. I have always loved you, and still do. You never returned my calls, never allowed me to explain what happened. I sighed to myself. She was looking her best, even dressed very conservatively. Marcy must be choosing her wardrobe, or only allowing Kelly to wear her more staid clothing now. Kelly only had the clothes she was wearing when I caught her, and what she was wearing now is certainly not that outfit. I use the term wearing, metaphorically, since apart from her heel boots, she was screwing buck naked at the time. What was there to explain, Kelly? You cheated, lied, and disrespected me. You shit all over our marriage. I know all about the Dalton gang. Your mother explained it to me in sordid detail, so there's nothing to wonder about. Kelly had the good grace to wince when I mentioned Dalton. I know we're finished, James, but we need to clear the air, so we can feel better about ourselves and be able to move on with our lives. Isn't it amazing? Once you step back and look with a dispassionate eye, you suddenly see things you always missed before. Here it appears that Kelly is trying to apologize. But is she? Or is there some other reason for her contrition? Mom said you probably wouldn't want to hear any excuses, and I'm not going to make any. Holding up my hand, I shook my head. Your mother's right, Kelly. Just what could you say to me that would help me hurt less with what you did, Kelly? I saw you having sex with all of them. You cucked me, Kelly. What can you possibly say to that? I tell you what, nothing. I could feel my anger returning all over again. All you want to do is to ease your own damn conscience at my expense, Kelly. You just want to go over every little miserable detail. All that will do is make me sick to my stomach again. Why should I allow you to feel better while making me feel miserable? Well, screw you and the horse you rode in on, Kelly. Find some other way to get it off your chest and feel better in yourself. I'm not interested in anything you have to say from here on in. I stewed for a second and then wondered. No. Can that for a minute? There is one question that you could answer for me. Why, when I made it abundantly clear that I had no wish to go down the swinging track, why did you continue to flog the dead horse? That's the one thing I still don't understand to this day. Why didn't you back off before it got to this? Kelly was sobbing as she fidgeting with her mother's ratty old clutch purse. I don't know, James. I think it gotta be a pride thing. You know how I hate to lose, and your refusal got to me. It was like you were challenging me, or something, and I lost my head. What Kelly had said actually made sense. Tell me, Kelly, did you ever enjoy our time in the bedroom? Was your love making for love, or was it just some form of control? Something you thought you had to hand out to pay for the things I did for or gave you? She looked at me with a confused look, and I knew then that her idea of a marriage was severely warped. For Kelly, marriage was a win and lose affair, and there was never going to be a win and win situation in her eyes. For her to win, someone has to lose, and in this case it was me. Just how screwed up is that? Before Kelly could answer, I heard a voice, "Hello, stranger," and I immediately knew who it belonged to. What is it about me that women seem to think it's okay to sneak up and attack me from behind? I spoke as I turned. Hi, Michelle. Good to see you. What are you doing here? I noticed another woman standing beside her, and with Sarah no less. What a pleasant surprise. Hello, Sarah. Long time no see. You're looking as ravishing as I remember. Sarah smiled. Too long, James. Way too long. You're looking as good as I remember too. Let me apologize for my part in the deception, but I had a job to do, if you can understand that. I smiled as well. No harm done on your side. It wasn't your doing, Sarah. Did you actually get stood up by a date? Or was that just a ruse? Sarah blushed with embarrassment. You bet my date stood me up, but you were tactful and gentle in your refusing my advances. So I forgive you. I gave each a peck on the cheek and they smiled. I have to admit to a little longing to see them both again as well. Kelly was set back on her heels. Who and what are these two witches doing here? Michelle giggled. My, what a mouth she is, James. Whatever did you see in her? I guessed it was a rhetorical question, because she turned her attention to Kelly. Don't you recognize us, my dear? Oh, that's right. The agency only gave our description and no actual picture of us. We're the women you foolishly threw your husband at, and we're on a mission. With that, she pirouetted. Good, huh? You paid top dollar for the best. I make you look like a bag lady, don't I? Does it kind of make you feel all queasy and sick inside? It mustn't have helped Kelly's vanity in the least that she was wearing her mother's old clothes. I thought to myself, This must be the female equivalent of name-calling we blokes do. You understand what I'm saying here? You know, what are ya? Come on. You wanna go, mate? Come on. But bloody hell, and shit a brick. I can see a catfight brewing, and I'm none too enthusiastic about jumping in between them. Have you ever thought to break up a catfight? Well, don't, as you'll come off the loser. Trust me on this one. They have talons that would put a wedge-tailed eagle to shame. So please, for your own health. I made that mistake once and will never make it again. I got into the scuffle when a Sheila I was dating at the time had a little kitty meow with some tarred-up trollop that thought my Sheila was the one dancing horizontally with her bloke. As I found out later, the damn trollop was right, but I didn't know that at the time. Which, I don't know which one nailed me with her claws, but I lost my one and only good going-out shirt and ended up with gouges on my shoulder blade that looked like Waves Rock. What? Waves Rock WA? Oh, for God's sake. Just Google it, you'll understand. A couple of my mates have commented over the years on my scars when they see them. I just tell him they're from an energetic thing I had when I was younger. You should see the impressed looks I get from the blokes. Well, it's a half-truth. What was I supposed to say? That I got tangled up in a stupid catfight and lost. Get real. Michelle flicked her long blonde locks back across her shoulder. That really was a silly thing to do, if I do say so myself. You need to get your head out of your butt, Kelly. It's not the roses you're smelling, sweetie. Only a moron would think of doing what you did. Kelly paled at the remarks Michelle was firing at her. I thought Kelly was good at verbally slicing and dicing, but Michelle was a master chef, so Kelly really had no comeback. I was starting to feel a little less anxious with these kiddies and their playtime. I started to chuckle. I was thinking the same thing, Michelle. I don't know what hurt more, Kelly's infidelity and her lack of respect, or the fact that I fell in love with and married a seriously stupid woman. What was it your mother said, Kelly? Michelle and Sarah perked up wanting to know, so I decided to tell them, much to Kelly's dismay. She said, "My daughter hasn't got the brains God graced a grasshopper." That was about it, wasn't Kelly? The two devilets broke out laughing at Kelly's expense. But I do have to ask myself, what does that say about my tastes? Michelle placed her hand on my arm as she brought her cackling under control, and that action certainly didn't sit well with Kelly either. It says that you loved and trusted her without question, which is how it should be, and for me that says a lot. I smiled. So how did you know I'd be here? Michelle chortled again. Have you forgotten? I worked for an agency that gathers information on people. I've had my eye on you ever since our dinner. I almost met up with you at that water hole you drink at, but some older woman beat me to you. Good looker too. Who was she? My eyebrow rose at the mention of my meeting with Marcy. Kelly will be able to tell you. After all, Marcy and I were talking hands-free to her at the time. Weren't we, Kelly? Or should I say that her mother was doing all the talking and all you were saying was yes, Mom, if I remember. Kelly held her head down, her shoulders shaking as she sobbed. So I turned back to Michelle. So, you've been stalking me then? I know that sounded nasty, but I have to admit that I was actually feeling good about the idea. Michelle's sheepish smile just looked so cute. Yes and no. I heard that there was new husband material being dusted off and put back into circulation, so I thought that I'd get in early with my bid. Quality merchandise is just so hard to come by these days. I had a little twinge of regret when I saw you with Marcy, is it? I nodded, but she didn't stay long and the peck on the cheek was friendly rather than, well, you know, then you went back to your friend and I thought better than to interrupt. It didn't look like a good time to be making an accidental meet-up for selfish reasons, so I left. She slid her right arm around Sarah's waist. That's when I decided to ask Sarah to help me convince you of the benefits I can offer. That is if you should decide that it might be in your best interest to, let's say, to take me for a spin. There goes those sexy eyebrows, and for a minute I was stunned to silence, as in unison. All my IQ points went, what did she just say? Michelle couldn't help but see the look on my face and ramped up the pressure. Sarah almost hugged me to death for making the suggestion to her. She smiled, as she affectionately rubbed the back of her left index finger on Sarah's cheek. She then brought the back of her hand up to her mouth, but made no attempt to whisper. I heard that you have this little fantasy that Sarah and I could help you out with. Michelle gave me a wicked smile and her eyebrow rose invitingly again, and then she trailed her fingers so damn tantalizingly down the side. That was it. My IQ officially shut up shop and was furiously flicking through Hustler magazines trying to come up with some ideas for me. I really needed to adjust myself, but I couldn't without making it obvious, so I just suffered the discomfort. What you think, James? You game to try? There goes those eyebrows again. There's nothing we won't do for the right man, and I know Sarah and I are both interested. Why am I thinking of that damn dog? Kelly stood gapping at the two women. She knew she was beautiful. I even thought so. But all of us damn well knew there was no way she could hold a candle to either of these two. This blonde bimbo has waltzed in on her territory and was attempting to luring her James. It was obviously making Kelly sick to her stomach. I suddenly had an epiphany. Of course, it all made sense now. While I signed a marriage certificate, she was signing for a credit card purchase. The witch put her marriage on credit. And like all good little credit card users the world over knows, you don't need to pay off that credit card purchase straight up, but make minimum monthly payments. What did I tell you about women and credit cards? I should have guessed it. What a stupid a hole I've been not to see it sooner. Kelly had bought herself a husband and used sex as payment for that purchase. This is really more screwed up than I had first thought. I now understand the woman, be it all too late I might add. But using that logic, then Kelly couldn't see what the problem was, and I understand why. Now, the credit card companies don't care if you make minimum payments. In fact, they encourage it. Not good practice for a marriage, but hey, she is female, so I have to allow a little leeway here. Not much, just a little. I could now see where I was at fault in the destruction of my marriage. I had inadvertently encouraged a concept that her parents had instilled in her. Kelly had never had to work for a damn thing in her life, and me not forcing her to work when we married had strengthened that concept. Had I made her work for her money to pay for that credit card, then she would have been a little more appreciative and careful just how she used it. That was my fault, but I can tell you right here and now, that is the only thing I'm taking credit for. Bullshit. She spat viciously. We all spun our heads at Kelly's outburst. That is all total bullshit. Damn you, Jim. You set this up. You're paying them to say those things. No woman in her right mind would do such a thing. This is just to rub my nose in it and get back at me for cheating on you. Oh, that statement is rich, Kelly. Sarah chimed in. This is coming from an addle pate who threw her husband at not one, but two women and then cries foul when she herself gets caught in her own web of lies and deceit. We know who's not in her right mind here, Kelly. What? Kelly snapped. I have to admit, even Michelle and I were somewhat taken back ourselves. Sarah smiled condescendingly at Kelly. An addle pate. Look it up in your Wiktionary. It means you're a moron, an idiot, with a mental acuity of a 2-year-old. I see them dark roots, Kelly. You're not even a true blonde, which only makes you even dumber. Oh my God. Here we go. That surly tornit. I saw the look Kelly was giving Sarah, but I quickly looked to Michelle, who seemed to be staring vacantly into space. I really don't know these other women well enough to say if they are really good friends or just mild acquaintances, but this is not looking good. Not good at all. If Michelle feels she's been slighted, then we're building for an even bigger catfight. I just know it. I was seriously looking for somewhere to hide. Did I tell you that Sarah is a redhead, while Michelle is blonde, and Kelly is a bottle blonde? I have? Okay, now you see why I'm looking for somewhere to hide. That's not right. Here, at this particular moment in time. Michelle blinked a couple of times and slowly turned to Sarah. Thanks for that intuitive observation, sweetie. I'm unsure how I feel about it. I love you too. Sarah just gave her a silly grin. You're welcome, my dear. The feeling's mutual. Maybe I should have added to that, present company excluded? Michelle frowned as if the second statement wasn't any better. I was so relieved that I started laughing to myself so hard I had tears rolling down my face and held my hands up in mock defense. Honest to God, Kelly, I didn't know a damn thing about it. It never even crossed my mind. But this conversation has made their offer all that much sweeter. I'm certainly interested in working out the finer details of Michelle's plan for seduction. Michelle had just finished giving Sarah an affectionate kiss on the cheek, a sort of, we'll discuss your comment later sort of kiss, and turned to Kelly. James is right, sweetie. He had no idea we were planning this. Everyone could almost see the steam pouring out of Kelly's ears, and I have no idea what she was thinking. But the look was one of frustration as she tried in vain to play catch up. So you now are a hypocrite. I tried to give you a threesome and you kicked me in the butt and threw me out and divorced me because of it. What a fool I was to ever marry an a-hole like you. What she said next made me think that she'd finally decided to skip some of the shit backlogging her pea-brain and race up to the front of this confab and start leading for a change. And what was that shit with my friends? I looked at her and puzzled over what she was saying. What the hell are you talking about, Kelly? Is that one and only gray cell of yours still under the hairdryer at the beauty salon? Kelly scowled. You know damn well, 2 of our friends are in hospital. Chad with 2 broken knees. Norm's right elbow is smashed. Carol rang Pam. Said Ben has up and left for good with everything he could lay his hands on and didn't say why. Susan said Mal went 2 days after Ben, leaving her with nothing but the kitchen sink. You telling me you don't know? I suddenly realized why Colin, Leonard's cop mate had asked me where I'd been on 2 separate occasions, but after I gave him my whereabouts, he seemed satisfied and wouldn't tell me what it was all about. I have to admit that I wasn't exactly firing on all cylinders at the time, so I never pushed it. I hadn't even bothered to keep track of those pricks. They were never our friends, Kelly. They were yours, and with friends like that, you don't need enemies. I had nothing to do with any of it, and the police have already spoken with me and they're satisfied. And as far as I'm concerned, if those shitheads were screwing you, then they were probably up to their ball and some other bloke's wife as well. I don't give shit what happens to them, frankly, so good riddance as far as I'm concerned. I then scowled. And as far as me being a hypocrite, now that is bullshit. I'm single now, Kelly, so what I do with anyone is my business. I told you I was no saint when I was single, but I do have my principles, and even though you may have cucked me for 6 months, I've still managed to keep my self-respect. I felt like strangling her on the spot. Oh, and before I forget, if you see Steve and he asks you about his car and wants it back, tell him to head down to the police impound yard. They took it out of my driveway so I could get my car into my garage. If he wants it, it'll cost him $5 grand. Or it goes into the car crusher and all he'll have then is a crumpled Tonka toy to play with. As an afterthought, I quipped, damn costly if you ask me. I bet he's really pissed, and maybe he's the one that has taken out his frustration on those 4 a-hole friends of yours. I was furious that she tried to make out I was a hypocrite. Did I tell you? Yeah, I'm sure I did, never mind. I got myself sidetracked, screw this multitasking shit. So I finished, back to Michelle and Sarah. If they wish to bring me into a 3-way relationship, then so be it. I haven't heard mention of any promises of being exclusive on anyone's behalf. That shit about you giving me my fantasy is total bullshit. I know at this point everyone seemed to be stepping back a ways from my tirade. I listened to that phone call you made to that damn vulture, Caroline. I lost my lunch into Leonard's waste paper basket listening to your damn phone call to Caroline. And you were going to make it worse by feeding me your dirtbag shit. Kelly's face froze. She now realized that I knew hell of a lot more than she first thought. I know my face was red with anger. In it, you clearly stated that you were sleeping with those a-holes at least 2 months before you even knew of my fantasy. You didn't do anything for me but lie and cheat, and then try to stop me from divorcing your 304, but if I ever found out about it, all those stupid charades your pea-brain came up with just proved to me how stupid you really were. Shit, the gall of the witch, I thought to myself. And that's another thing. I wouldn't mind betting both my nuts. Yeah, I know what you're thinking, mate. Gotta be sure of yourself if you're gonna bet them morons. I bet you set all this up in the first place as soon as your sex buddies showed up. That's how sure I am. I know it was you asking me if I had any fantasies. I have now to ask myself why? I'll tell you why. Just so you could get buck naked with those backstabbing a-holes without losing your meal ticket. Kelly was crying by the finish of my malediction, and Michelle chirped in, oh boy, and by the way, there's a man here who wants to chat with you too. I looked at Michelle and thought, what the hell's she talking about? Did I tell you that women are good at multitasking? Michelle was probably keeping track of, when her next hair appointment was, what color the drapes had to be her living room, to ring her boss and sort out some detective shit, picking up milk for her mother on the way home, the guy she was now introducing, and that's apart from my rant. As for me, I have now just lost my one and only train of thought. Women are certainly a conundrum. Michelle nodded to a person standing near, and he stepped up to our group. Kelly Garrett? Kelly nodded and sniffed. That's my maiden name. What do you want? Not much, ma'am. I just want to inform you that you are served. He handed her an envelope. I suggest you get yourself a solicitor in regard to action brought by ACE investigation in the little matter of an unpaid account that is now more than 2 months overdue. Kelly looked stunned at the envelope he handed her. Have a nice day, ma'am. He then walked off, whistling to himself. I could really get to like that guy. Kelly started to tear up again. This can't be happening. She tore the letter open and gasped, I can't pay this account. And this says I owe $1,500. That's not right. The whole bill was only $1,500 and I paid $1,000 as a deposit. What happened to that money? Michelle smiled and took a check out of her purse and waved it in front of Kelly's face before handing it back to me. I noticed it was actually one of our checks made out to ACE Investigation for $1,000 with Kelly's signature on it. Michelle continued, You're right, Kelly, but I managed to convince Brock not to try to cash that check and charge the total amount to your account. He agreed with me, stating that the check would most likely have bounced anyway, since James obviously now knew and probably had the account locked down. He also said that it was a despicable act. Shame on you for trying to use James's money against him, and just so you could get yourself a get-out-of-jail-free card too. Kelly was going to fire off again, but Sarah jumped in first. Michelle's right, sweetie. Brock's a really nice bloke if you're on his good side. But wow betide you if you piss him off like you did. I wouldn't be ringing for another surveillance job if I were you. He's likely to reach through the phone and drag you down the line, then feed your shits first into his paper shredder. We all watched in silence as Kelly's expression went from sickly to sickly frightened. Then Sarah piped back in, "That's despicably low, you dumb butt. Making your husband pay for his own cucking." Kelly turned to me and cried, "You and that damn prenuptial have left me destitute. I don't have 2 cents to rub together, let alone be able to pay this. I have no clothes, no place to live, no car, and now no life. I don't even have any job qualifications to get one. What the hell am I going to do?" By now, her makeup had completely run down off her face following the tear tracks. I thought for a minute. Don't give me that crap, Kelly. There is not enough justice in this world for that to happen. Remember, I was there when you had that little heart-to-heart with Mummy. You won't starve, Kelly, but I can tell you this, sweetie. I would not wish on my worst enemy what is going to happen to you at your mother's. I doubt you'll be sitting for a very long time after your mother gets through chewing you a new a-hole. I thought about what Marcy had said and took a leaf out of her nasty book. If you don't like that option, there is one qualification you've been working on for the last year that might get you out of trouble, Snookums. And from what I've heard, there's a vacancy on 5th and in Street. Just make sure you get your regular medical checkups and use protection. You have maybe 5 or 10 good years in you still. Oh, and but remember, Kelly, there'll be no darking of Mummy's doorstep and definitely not mine. Kelly wailed and stomped her feet. This isn't fair, James. She's driving me insane. You don't know what it's like. I never would have used the prenuptial if the roles were reversed. You can't leave me with nothing. I could see Kelly wasn't interested in clearing the air, as she had said, or saving her relationship with me in the least. No. It was clear now she was making one last-ditched effort to get enough money to get away from all the hoop jumping that her mother was going to be putting her through. I sneered at Kelly again. You forget, Kelly. I was married to you for 6 years, and when it comes to control, you are your mother's daughter, Kelly. I know exactly what it's like to have someone manipulating you from dawn till dusk. So bullshit in triplicate, Kelly. Leonard helped me draft the codicil, and he knew better than me what you were. As he said to me, I'm not hampered by your love for Kelly. He was the one who convinced me to put that 10-year alimony clause in. He knew the dollar signs would be rolling around in your eyes so fast. Your face would look like a poker machine. I was back to being furious now. He and I both knew that you would have exercised the clause to the fullest, and I'd be paying through my eye teeth. Do you remember what you said in that phone conversation with that witch Caroline? If not, he'll be paying me for the next 10 years to screw with anyone I want. There's no compassion in you whatsoever, Kelly, so don't expect any in return. With that, Kelly slumped to the floor in defeat, bawling into her hands. I took a deep breath to calm myself down. Thank you, Kelly. I'm glad we had this little talk. I feel so much better now. Yes, 2-0. Game over. I win. Okay, so I'm gloating. Tough shit. I held out my arms for Michelle and Sarah. Shall we go, ladies? We have some negotiating to do. It would be our pleasure, James. They both chimed in with enormous grins on their faces. As we walked away, Michelle commented, "Oh, by the way, Brock says no extra charge." I looked at her funny, and she held her finger to her lips, flicking her head back to Kelly. She whispered, "It's not as bad as she made out. One will be walking with a limp for the rest of his life, and the other's tennis career is toast. But hey, they'll live, and the other 2 chicken shits will be looking over their shoulders for a very long time." I shook my head. One more question, if you please. Why didn't I get let in on this?" Michelle grinned. "You ever see that movie Independence Day with Will Smith?" I nodded that I had. "Well, you'll be familiar with the concept of plausible deniability. Brock knew you were off fishing with your boss. I have never seen him so pissed, so he took that opportunity to have a little chat about cause and effect with Kelly's gang. He knew when the police came knocking on your door, you would react just as you did, without any guilty look on your face, and by the look of things it worked a treat." I suddenly understood what she was saying. I took the check out of my pocket, grabbing Michelle's handbag for support. I scratched out Kelly's signature and resigned underneath, then endorsed on the back. "Tell Brock thanks, but I pay my way. Give him a kiss and hug for me, and tell him I owe him more than this shitty little check." Michelle took the check with a grin on her face a mile wide. "I'll do just that, but only for you, James, but no more. Brock's just not my type." Now you can ask yourself, was I really stoked as we walked off? Absolutely. Thank you both for sticking it to Kelly back there. I felt like she had still won somehow. You know, with the cucking and everything, even though I was the financial winner in the divorce, my self-esteem was really shot to shit. I felt like a gullible dust bunny sucking up everything she handed out. and felt she still had it over me with her lies, deceit, and disrespect. I had a sad smile on my face, and Sarah gave me a comforting hug. When it comes to humiliation, women know women best. The old saying holds true. Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. I grinned. That isn't quite the quote, you know. Heaven has no rage like love to hatred turned, or nor hell a fury like a woman scorned. Michelle gave me an exasperated look. Okay, so we might not have been scorned, but hell, we were certainly pissed at being used like that. Michelle and I both knew you'd be still hurting from Kelly's betrayal and needed to see her brought down a peg or two. I started laughing. Peg or two be damned. You two whipped the whole bloody ladder right out from under her. Just the same, I'm glad you did. My macho self-image feels that I should have been the one getting the revenge, not the two of you. But in the end, all I could think about was just getting away and putting it behind me. Hell, between what Kelly's mother has in store for her and what you two did just now, I kind of feel a little like the damsel in distress and the three of you, my white knights, riding in to rescue me. My ears were burning with embarrassment. I'm not sure how I feel about that, but I think a lot TLC will go a long way in soothing my bruised male ego. I don't think I have ever seen her so distraught in my entire life. The bit about letting me have my fantasy didn't just break the back. It snapped her poor camel in two, and I appreciate it, even if it was only for her benefit. By the way, just who is your type? Michelle looked at me with a cheeky grin. Who said anything about only being for her benefit? My face showed the confusion I was in. Okay, so my IQ was frantically brainstorming ideas and had left me speechless, and both women giggling. Home James and don't spare the horses. Michelle and I turned to Sarah with open-mouthed looks of query. She looked back at us. What? I've always wanted to say that. We all broke up laughing. Michelle licked her lips and sighed dreamily. She has the sexiest legs I have ever seen. Michelle turned to me wide-eyed and then bounced up. Does this mean we're friends now? I didn't understand. Did I tell you that women really know? Never mind. Yeah. I do believe that boffing each other for the last hour could be construed into being a sort of friendship with benefits. I said sarcastically. Of course we're friends. What made you say that? Mickey slumped down beside me, rested her gorgeous chin back down on her immaculate hands, looking me directly in the eye. She gave me the sultriest look from her bedroom eyes that I have ever seen. You like the description? I could go on for hours. Never mind. I have better things to do than talking to you mob of yobos, so back off and get your own life. Now I know I'm going to die here. You know, James, for all of Kelly's faults, I have to admit that she has one hellishly wicked taste in clothes. Mind if I try some on? I just burst out laughing at the thought that Kelly had just spent almost 15 grand only a couple of months ago, and she never once got to wear any of them. Not in the least, Sarah. You and Mickey can knock yourselves out. I lay back grinning like that stupid Cheshire cat. I know I'm going to die a happy man. Either that or I'm already dead and in heaven. I might just have to rethink my ideas on that instinctual optimistic dog. From where I'm laying, he does seem so stupid now. As an afterthought, I really hoped they weren't going to go too fast in screwing me to death. I now understand why Dad got remarried. It doesn't sit well with me, but hey, Dad and I are getting along famously. He's learned a lot in the last 6 months, and now knows almost as much as me. Marcy drops over to the folks' place on a regular basis, and though I don't ask, she's keeping me informed of Kelly's re-education. I think it's more to do with helping me feel better than any idea of us getting back together, or so I overheard her and Dad talking when she dropped in when I had Mickey and Sarah there. I felt a little uncomfortable introducing them, but Marcy smiled graciously and offered her hand to both. I was a little worried as well, knowing how Marcy and Dad go at each other. I heard Marcy apologizing for what her daughter had done. Dad said, "No need to apologize, Marcy. It wasn't your doing, and besides, I think James is doing okay now." Yes, I suppose you're right there, Graham. In fact, I think he's doing more than just okay. We could take a leaf out of your son's book, you know? Dad gave Marcy a quizzical look. He's managed to trade a lemon in for 2 peaches, certainly no slouch in my book. I can tell you that if it weren't for their own laughter, they definitely would have heard mine. I had to lock my ego in the back room for the rest of the evening, just so I could function without looking smugger than I was. What was the reason why Dad got married again? I hear you ask. Dad, Leonard and I have discussed the subject ad nauseum. God is female. Her sense of humor sucks as big time. Such is life with loving wives. Love them or hate them. They're damn hard to live with and almost impossible to stay away from. Not to mention, the law hasn't been passed on loving wives season yet, and takes a dim view on using them for target practice. You're doomed no matter how you cut the cards. So I say, Go with the flow, mate, and get what you can, when you can, and try to be like that damn dog. Happy you're not dead. I realize that when all else fails, good friends are the ones you can truly count on in a bind. For me, they are Mickey, Sarah, and now Brock for giving me closure to a stressful period in my life. I have to thank Leonard, Marcy, and my dad for their foresight into the perils of marriage and sticking by me when I needed them most. I have to wonder, can Kelly say the same of her friends? Oh well, c'est la vie. I think it's pronounced c'est la vie. Okay then, such is life. No, I don't speak French, I googled it. The moving finger writes, and having writ, moves on. Nor all thy piety nor wit shall lure it back to cancel half a line, nor all thy tears wash out a word of it. The Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam, Fitzgerald's verse. Author's notes on dreaming. I believe both of Lenny's ex-wives got into affairs with other married men and lost everything they made off poor Lenny. They sold their stake in Stanton Chemicals at a much reduced share market price to pay for loss of consortium actions brought against them by other distraught wives. With the money James got from his lawsuits, he and Lenny are now the major shareholders of Stanton Chemicals, which is doing well by all accounts, with both Michelle and Sarah now working there side by side in their own department, customer relations. Lenny keeps saying he's sworn off tall women, but can't seem to get past the beauty. After all, he is a male, even as short as he is, just ask the dog. He has another woman now, and he takes great delight in resting his head between her pillows. That's right. He may have sworn off them, but he has this leaky hydraulics valve that is supposed to shunt blood to his brain. He likes the fact that James is now happy again. While he has been able to recover from his own acute anemia after the demise of his ex-wives, his new lady is happy as well since there's more blood for obvious reasons. Chad had to give up running to keep fit because of his knees and sits around cultivating his beer gut instead, much to Pam's disgust. And there's no hot monkey sex anymore, well, not with her orangutan at any rate. Norm had to hand in his membership to his exclusive tennis club, having a severe case of tennis elbow. He has gone deaf in the aftermath of his hospitalization. E.B., Beth, Liz, and Elizabeth. All of them haven't noticed that nobody is actually talking to them anymore. In fact, she hasn't noticed much at all, and they're quite happy talking amongst themselves. The tax office is looking into Norm's tax returns for the last 10 years, as there seems to a discrepancy in the dependents he's been claiming. As for Ben and Mal, well, they've never been seen since. None of the girls associate with Kelly or each other anymore, preferring to keep to themselves. Purely for selfish reasons, I'd like to think that Kelly spent a couple of hard and troublesome, desolate years in a minimum-paying job to pay off her debts and get enough together to move out of her mother's place. That is after her mother verbally beats some sort sense into her, and then lives in a one-room bedsit for a little peace and quiet, paying her dues while rethinking her priorities. As time passes, she finally does find a husband, whom she then proceeds to worship to death. Well, for one reason, again purely selfish, I don't want to ever have to cross her path, lol. James gets married to Michelle after a 12-month interesting and intense courtship, with a prenuptial of Mickey's own choosing. And with that prenuptial, she convinces him that she has no wish to bring any other men into their marriage. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.